over here. Who the heck knows where Matt Walker's is? And Tom Ewing's wandering out somewhere else. And basically, this started out as a Library of Congress grant that is open to schools and institutions. And we had a grant and we were focusing on how to use newspapers, which we weren't really sure what to do with them, to teach history and to teach about moments in history that it starts with a narrow moment in history, but by using the newspapers we were hoping to go to a bigger picture. We were also, by doing this, hoping to model a process, historical thinking, I'm looking at these days now because it's sick to death of it, Skim-C as a model for historical thinking. And so you're going to see a couple of things, and hopefully we're going to do a couple of things. We are going to be looking at newspapers and trying to answer a historical question, which was about an event in 1901. And it really comes down to, and it was mentioned today, the dining of Washington. Roosevelt invited Booker T. Washington to dinner. Roosevelt had just been president a month, and he had good press. The honeymoon period was on. He'd been seen as, during a time of national tragedy after McKinley's assassination, he'd been seen as holding a firm, control of the country. He was seen as bipartisan. He was picking some Democrats for federal office on the advice of Booker T. Washington, a couple of them. And so things were going relatively well. And then at 2 a.m. on the evening, I think it's October 16th, an AP wire just came out after a reporter looked in the guest log of the White House, and it just said Booker T. Washington was a guest of Roosevelt at the dinner. And so that went out into the news, and the social media of the day was the newspapers. And what's nice is, or what we're going to end up seeing is, the regional differences, but we get just through this one event insights into Jim Crow. I think we're 5 years after Plessy v. Ferguson. James Lowen talks about this being the nadir of race relations, this period. We also get to see the significance of Booker T. and Roosevelt, and play with it's not necessarily relatively little known, but play with an event that's not enough in textbooks that can quickly open up issues and insights into this period in a relatively quick way. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bounce relatively quickly. But I would like you guys just to quickly take notes here and tell me what you see. So just look at that. As you get settled, look at the image. What's it about? What are you seeing? Roosevelt and Washington at the same table. Excellent. What else? Where's it from?
Richmond.
Richmond. So Southern Press. What else?
Somebody's looking in the window, but I can't tell who it is.
Okay, somebody's looking in the window and you can't tell who it is. We did blow this up, and if I said that is, I forgot his name. His middle name's Good. Jones. Thank you, Kathy. Thomas Good Jones, from former governor of Alabama. Okay? So somebody's peering in and looking in. What else are we seeing? What else we got?
Is that a Greek goddess, Athena, or somebody?
Right, there's somebody there, and if we did the magic paper, which doesn't work, does it?
You have to be closer to the screen.
Closer to the screen.
Very close to the screen. It's one of those.
There it is.
Ooh, it's too tall for me. Actually, that, when you look close, says south.
Oh, her headband.
Headband, yeah, headband says south. Okay, what else? So what, and this is interesting, so, well, I find it interesting. So we see it says, go way back and sit down. Okay? So what's, and she...
But she's pointing to Roosevelt.
Yeah. So the South is pointing to Roosevelt.
Saying go way back and sit down. I don't understand why she would be pointing to Roosevelt saying go way back and sit down unless she's saying...
Or is Roosevelt saying to her, go way back and sit down?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. But she's pointing.
She's pointing, go way back and sit down. Maybe we'll say
She's
something.
being held accountable for inviting them.
Right, it's going to set his career back.
Going to set his career back. Nice.
She wants them to move way back.
She wants him to move way back. Move away from him, you mean? And
No, the two of them get back up and move way back.
okay, okay. What else do we see?
The skin color difference is extreme. I mean, they made Roosevelt really, really, really white, and they made him really, really, really dark in contrast.
What does it say on the flag?
That says capital.
It just says capital.
So we know. So that's the idea of putting it in place. Okay. Now it's about a dinner. What we we're looking at this. It actually was mentioned in.
Yep.
Yeah. And so a century ago, this is John McCain when he was doing his concession speech, and he talked about President Theodore Roosevelt's invitation to Booker T. Washington to visit, and it came within the first 2 minutes of his speech. To dine at the White House was taken as an outrage in many quarters in America today. America today is a world away from the cruel and prideful bigotry of that time. There is no better evidence of this than the election of African American to the presidency today. And so I just thought that was a nice way of looking at this. What we're going to do is going to read some newspapers from the time. We're going to take a look in at the contemporary period and see how that opens up. We're going to do it using a scaffold. I'm going to model the scaffold for you really quickly to show students, but then we're not going to spend a lot of time on it because, you know, you can do what you want with it and play, and we'll just read newspapers. I was going to say stuff on history. Blah, 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 inquiry, evidence is important, kind of thing. A little bit more about evidence, blah, 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 history, evidence. That's what makes it different from a story, that you need evidentiary warrant. Blah, blah, blah. Newspapers may be a good way of playing with it. It's not always easy to get into newspapers. And so and to analyse primary sources. So scaffolds are sometimes important. You can't just say to children, analyse this. What does analyse mean? How can we help them do that? One model we have is Skim C, where you summarise, contextualise, infer, monitor, and then corroborate all your different sources. Here are the 5 phases, and we've got a handout that we can show you how to do it in a few minutes. I think it's over here somewhere. I'm not very good with handouts. They have a pathetic turn when it comes to that. What did we do here? Anyway, so here we are. And that's in the handout packet as well. Summarise, goes to source type, goes to all different things. We also have contextualise, which is one of probably the most important things that you need to do when you're doing history, is recognise it from a different period of time. That we're not looking at the world through 21st century eyes. And this is really important with this one, because the N-word, Negro, and then the really bad word is mentioned in these newspapers. And so as teachers, you need to set up a safe space to be able to discuss this language in there. Yes? Stephanie, yes.
I wrote about this episode in my book, and initially in my first draft I said the press reaction to this dinner was horrifying. And one of the people who edited my book was my niece, Emily, who was a graduate student at the time. And she said to me, well, what did they say? And I said, well, I can't say it because it's really nasty. And she said, well, but don't you think those really nasty words are what people need to read so that they understand? And of course she was absolutely right. I was being hesitant. I didn't want to use the N-word in my book. Yeah. But in context, I kind of had to help people understand how that time was.
And it is actually also used, I mean, the word Negro is just used, and that's just general description type of thing. But it's hateful. The N-word is also used, and it's like the media is actually, a lot of it's editorials or letters, and it is used with hate.
Well, this was in the mouth of a U.S. Senator.
Yeah, Tillman. Right.
Now that nigger has had dinner at the White House, we'll have to kill 10,000 niggers before they know their place again.
Yeah, Ben Tillman.
That was the quote I didn't want to use, but I did.
And it's in there. And so to me, though, when you work, you've got to know your students, but you have to be... It's talking about the power of language and talking about the past, and it is a different time, and it's from a different space. So we need to be very careful with that, but we need to open it up. That quote is actually also, there's some very small, view of newspapers is, there's some very small sections that there's one, and we'll see about them hissing a picture of Theodore Roosevelt in the cinema, in a theatre, not cinema, in a theatre. And somebody says, well, why are you hissing? And they drop the N-word again. Well, he took to dinner, kind of thing. So we've got to be very careful with the language, but it's important from the time. We can also then make suggestions. And so what does the evidence infer? We also can talk about monitoring. Have we answered all the questions? And the big question is, how did the press react? The social media of the time, how did it react to this dinner? And that's what we're going to explore. And then corroboration means we take one source individually, but then we start to take a series of sources to compare. Now in a classroom, what's nice is some of these newspapers recount what the Philadelphia paper said, what the New York said, what the child... So you may only need one newspaper with a child. Or you've got African American press, you've got the Southern Press, and you've got Boston Journal. And you could just use 3 newspapers and have a group over here looking at grouping. Let's see what's going on and let's try, a spectrum of response kind of thing. So that's what we've got there playing. The way we do it is we talk about, we're going to model this. This is SCIM. You summarise what you see, you contextualise, you infer, you monitor. And we have those series of questions. Now, you can break it down any way you like in a sense of it's recursive, it's not a linear pattern or iterative. And we have different models, so you could put it that way. Another chart. So it's just building graphic organisers for children. And that's just using one newspaper at a time. And then we start thinking about it. Well, here's some background. Racial segregation, Jim Crow laws, America's response. And so what kind of things can we kind of start pulling out? And there is things in there where I like them to look at the newspaper, but I also like them to look just at the side of the article that's on Booker T. And these things about miscegenation. Did I say that right? Okay. And things like that. These things about race riots, right, that Kathy keeps finding in there. These things about lynchings. All in the same newspapers talking, so it's about the context of the time. So one newspaper can open up a great deal of information. So October 16th, Roosevelt comes for dinner. Okay, our question is, how did the newspapers across the United States react and report on Booker T. Washington's dinner at the White House? How can we investigate the question? And then what does the Library of Congress have to do with it? The Library of Congress, ours was funded through it because we use the Chronicle and America history newspapers. So they're all online, and you can download them as a PDF, and you can blow them up on your computer, or do what we do, which is we print them off large scale, and then children can play with them that way and go. So we pulled these, they're all freely available, so from the Chronicle and America database. So we go back to this one, we'll model it. So imagine that you've got a big piece of paper, we can put the little article, or just this time the political cartoon in the middle. Kathy did this, we had some graduate students do this one with us, and also I had a couple of my kids mess with this, and they came up with this amount of analysis when they were actually looking at the newspaper. And it's, so for one article, and it's not even an article, it's like a lot of stuff. One thing we did when we do this is, though, kids have got a textbook with them, kids have also got the computer with them, and so they're going online when we go in here. So the big question is, how did the newspapers across report about the US? So if we look, they had things that you said. Political cartoon. Date says, go way back and sit down. Now the weirdest thing is, in some of these newspapers, there is another thing that says, things they're saying. And it says, go way back and sit down, but I don't understand the context of go way back and sit down in 1901. To me, it fits with the 1950s and 60s. I just don't get what it means in 1901, and I'm still struggling with that. So if anybody knows, I'd love to know. I'm starting to wonder if it's just like a catchphrase from some, like, I don't know, from like vaudeville or something? I don't know.
Well, one of the things that strikes me is that he's casting a shadow of the South, right?
Yeah.
So she's the South, and the shadow's emanating specifically. And Teddy, of course, is former boxer and the Rough Rider. He's the epitome of, this is the rise of manliness.
Yes.
Masculinity, right? So telling him to go way back and sit down may be a way, I think, of suggesting that he may be taking his rhetoric of manliness and his rhetoric of this kind of, virtuous Republican, forward-thinking activism too seriously. Maybe.
Yeah, that's nice. We also go back in time, step back to, yeah.
And why is Way written out the way that it is?
Well, and when we did this analysis, we got 4 characters, Lady South, a guy looking in the mirror, in the window, Governor Jones. So then the kids start getting, who the heck's Governor Jones? Start getting on Wikipedia type of thing. We also, not sure who the cartoonist is, but we know that the audience is at least Richmond people. We also think it represents the South's general concerns with inviting a black man. So very quickly we've summarised. So when children often look at this, you go, what's this? They go, I don't know. Right, remember the Albany plan with the snake? You ask kids to look at that. I don't know. You know? I don't know. Snake, I don't know. So we've made them slow down a little bit with the questions. So then we go to contextualising. Well, we've already said 1901. This is October 20th. We already said produced in the South. So we've got some repetition, but we're slowing people down and thinking about it. We said, then you start getting the kids to go, well, what are your textbook? What else happened? How, you know? And we've mentioned Plessy v. Ferguson. Okay? Desmond, you want to say something?
Richmond, in the other biographies, the first place he encounters segregation is when he arrives in Richmond and no one would let him
Stay
into
in the
a hotel, in an inn, and he sleeps on the street. And then he, at the end of the book, he comes back to Richmond where he's delivering a speech to the wealthy folks. It's kind of in some ways interestingly prophetic that it's in Richmond.
That I did not know. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. And so we have people going on. We've got 1902 as well, Virginia. That's the new constitution where we disenfranchise all blacks and a massive amount of poor whites as well. But we start with the black codes coming in. And so you can see what starts happening. He's only been there a month. He's the youngest president at the time. He's only popped in a month. We also say that while racial segregation and it's really bad, there are people like Booker T. Washington who are making the press. These people who are well known. So there are people who are well known at this stage. And this is stuff coming from the class. This is us modelling and building out what's going on. We had to look this up, but he's a Republican who supports the Republicans, blah, blah, blah. So we had to go beyond just the context of the time. We go to inferring. So what does it suggest? And this is how you guys started doing this, and we kind of tried to discipline ourselves a little bit, but we often start diving into inferring immediately. We have some things. It suggests this act was done in Washington because the capital's in the background. It's also, we've got people like Governor Jones that are interested. Well, if you check out the Washington papers online, Washington has been in touch with Governor Jones prior, and it is Washington who suggests a white Democrat should come to federal office because he supports African American, he's against lynching. He's willing to work with the African-American population, even though he's a white Southern Democrat. So that's why we find out eventually he's there. Yeah.
He's from Alabama?
Yeah.
During that time?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's...
So that's the one Washington referred to Roosevelt?
Yeah, Washington mentions his name, writes a letter as well and says, this guy could be a good choice. Could be an option. And Jones actually, in the letters, writes to Washington and says, hey, check me out, type of thing. Yeah, so you see he's a powerful man, you start to make these connections very quickly. We didn't know that when we first started reading this, but then other news articles pop up and you start piecing it together with the kids. The way the lady is poking or interrupting the dinner suggests that Roosevelt doesn't have much power as he thinks he does, especially with the South. These are our inferences, trying to base it on evidence. Okay, and we can have some great debates, you know, talking about this. The South is very unhappy with Roosevelt. Body of states, Lady South represents Roosevelt, demanding move away. Now this is where we get way back. Is that the fact that she wants him to move away from the table? Is his behaviour inappropriate? Does get way back mean maybe should move back in time to the ideals that, you know, of segregation? You know, we could have put in the 1950s and 60s, that would have made sense. We're still not sure.
Isn't this a song about look away, you know, look away? It just, I keep thinking that song with Virginia.
About how far back,
It's Dixie. It is Dixie.
in my generation, the cheerleaders used to say on the football field, push them back, way back.
Yeah.
So I think that's.
That would be
That was still all right.
Some people look around and
So
see
that's
all
cool.
They still do that, sure.
And then we go into this one, and this area of like a napkin in his collar, how he's sat, and comparing who's got the best dinner manners that starts to pop up, and things like that. So we start playing. Questions to ask: is this cartoon representative of ideas in the North and South? Another question to ask: how did the Northern press and American press report this event? Okay, another question then. So what's the big deal, and how did they talk about it? You know, what was, you know, get some repetition, but what was the Southern American and Northern? Blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. Okay? What led to the dinner? What was discussed at the dinner? So these questions from this one cartoon start to emanate so we can do some more explanations. who's former Governor Jones? Jump on Wikipedia. It's pretty, you know, we can start finding things out as well. Were political cartoons always in the front page? How's that organised? Get way back and sit down. Was that a common saying? A way to chastise someone? Or does it refer to remembering the past? We're still not sure. Is there anything to the position of Roosevelt at the corner of the table? The cartoon is useful. One of the most important things I think about using a primary source is, what's the point of it? Is it useful for answering our question? So that's one of the things. This one is useful for giving a glimpse into one perspective.
Who was this Governor Nash that they mentioned from Ohio? In the, right after it says may have, if you look at all the bullets down, it's like may have even wider effect, and then it says senators from Ohio and Governor Nash in the same state.
Where are you? Are you on a newspaper?
It's on the column. It's on the column down. You can't read it. You probably can't see it there, but
It's on the paper itself.
It's on the paper. It's on the.
Oh, it's in the other article.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to check.
Is this commentary?
They're giving another commentary. In fact, we've got that newspaper. So what you've got here then is, and we're going to move really quickly, right? Oh, well.
I have a thought about the
Okay.
get way back and sit down.
See, you could just do
Is
this
it
one
possible-
piece as a lesson.
This is the South.
That is the South.
Is it possible that Roosevelt is telling her, get way back and sit down? You know, because the South is very sensitive to this thing
And they
about
need them separated.
social relations. I've made my choice. I'm going with the black man. I don't care what you think anymore. Get way back and sit down.
Yeah, and I would say, what a great inference. And then we start to lay out the evidence and say, using the evidence and using evidentiary warrant, build your interpretation of this.
Yeah.
And what insights does it give us?
Yeah.
And that's why I like the cartoon as a starter, to get us in. What we're going to do now is we're going to give you some newspapers. We give you the front cover. So you've got to hunt and peck a little bit. Yes, Desmond?
The first sentence here is striking. President Roosevelt stands on his dignity,
So to speak.
so to speak.
So to speak.
To think of standing on his dignity and not just sit there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really, I mean, it's very written with a specific viewpoint and very powerful. What do you want, Chris?
Well, I'm just wondering what happens after this. Do we know what Roosevelt's reaction is to all of this? To what, you know, to what the papers are saying? Does he have any kind of response? Is there?
Both of them stay very quiet.
Yeah.
Both of them refuse to respond. There is, I ain't saying anything. Booker T. Washington does send a telegram that's in the PowerPoint saying, this is because we've got elections coming up, and the Southern press and the Democrats are trying to run with this. It's going to disappear. It's a storm in a teacup. Now, what we do realise is, this is after the honeymoon period. Booker T. Washington, I think, grows from this experience, and he becomes well-positioned. He's never invited back for dinner, but he will meet Roosevelt at 10 o'clock. I think it hurts Roosevelt to an extent because he's getting battered around.
Yeah, because I was just looking outside and said something that next week after that they even met at Yale. Or
Yes, they were going to meet at Yale.
And they kind of...
They never had dinner, and they had extra guards at Yale. Yeah.
Right.
So take a look at the newspapers. We have different ones. If you'd like to try the skim, but see what's out there. Some of them are very long. Some of them are short. Find out the location, and what we'd do is we would have a map with children, and we would start to get down people's information. So which one you got? The cassette from Cleveland. Okay. Yeah, and then that bit there. This one is my favourite one, and the quality of the PDF is really, really well. Yeah. They're really hard to see. So I started from this one. They're all very positive. It's like, he's at Yale, it's what are people saying about it. So you get the northern view that's much more. Now you can see this one. Okay, good. And you see, there's a lot there. David's got loads on his. Some of you've got very small. What have you got? Oh, the Salt Lake Herald. They're not easy to read. Now, on a PDF, you can actually blow them up massive. And that's why, in the handout here, they're all transcribed. Or most of them are all transcribed. So you can do that and you can break them down. But it's nice for the students to get the hands on a small piece like that. I've also clipped pieces out and blown them up on a PowerPoint as well. So that's why I wanted to include that. So which one will you use? Southern? Oh, Southern Prejudice.
We were trying to find one that was a little bit easier to read.
That may be that one. That may be the only one on that one, because sometimes it's only a small bit that you've got in the newspaper itself.
So which one did you get?
Minneapolis.
Oh, okay. So this is probably not a very strong against it.
Yeah.
Right?
So then you can start
But it's
getting a
still
different
worded
perspective.
interestingly.
Okay.
I mean, they're saying it's fine.
African American newspaper, do you think?
Yeah, but you wouldn't word it today like this.
If it wasn't.
You know,
It's got
it's
nothing
not
to do with that. But
It's not Washington who's black, his skin, his brains aren't black, his work is not black. They're making it sound like there's still something wrong with being black. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, or you can take that, or the other way that you can see that. I mean, Washington did in his own way have many people who felt that he wasn't pushing hard enough, right? We had Du Bois who was going to what would be considered more liberal, whereas Washington was like, let's work on economics first before we look at social those are going. So that could be what they're talking about here with the black, okay, so he's got thick skin, but he's not on our side, I guess you would say. So that could be a way that they're saying.
And then what's really interesting is, I know that's different. I mean, there's children you can say, all right, I want to focus on this.
Oh, okay. This is probably very similar.
Another issue, African Americans are different at the time. What I'm doing what I sometimes do is I cut them out like that and then put them on a PowerPoint and just view on the PowerPoint and just plus we've got all the transcriptions in as well.
It's much easier in this format too.
Well, I feel like it's more.
So I tried to blow this one a little bit more, David, actually.
It's real time.
Still not clear.
I'm still, yeah, you can look at it on the computer, but I'm still.
No, you need to hold it again. But it's nice that it's blown up like this. It's not impossible to read because if you just give them a regular size, they're not going to be able to muddle through it.
Here's the bad language one. Oh, they do? And then you get the idea of how you can skim it if you like. As a group, I would start to corroborate. Now, with children in the handout, what we've also got is we've just got headlines. You could just use the newspaper headlines and ask them then to put them on a map. And so now some of the headlines are a bit difficult. One's called Roosevelt Dines a Darkie. And so you've got to then talk about what that means again with the children, but sometimes just using the headlines for people who are struggling with reading. Or you just use that one cartoon as we did when people are struggling for time and talk about race relations and play with it is an option. This has led us, this kind of quick exploration has led us to contact the White House because there's a guy called Lucerne who did the Black History, I'm pointing at you because you may have read it, Black History of the White House. And in that, he doesn't necessarily make the assertion, but he doesn't deny the assertion that the very next day, October 17th, was the day when the White House really became known as the White House. Officially, that's when all the stationery was changed.
Because it was called the Executive Mansion.
It was called the Executive Mansion. And so on October 17th, it became known as the White House. So I contacted the White House Historical Association to ask them about it. And they said, oh, so I bet you're talking about Lucerne and his comments. And they put me in touch with the curator of the White House. And then, so she sent me the two documents. I've got the two PDF documents. I don't have them in here, but I'll get them to people, that talk about changing the name on October 17th and doing it. But they said this was well planned in advance. It had been called the White House a long time ago. It was one of those awful coincidence. But this historian had made this kind of subtle innuendo. And so that's what we're going to build on the website as well, just a trail of talking to the historians, the curator, and things like that. All right, Erin, let's see what people have got real fast at.
Do you guys want to share a little bit?
We're just going to share what people have got because you can then see the range.
Don't start with us.
Okay. Would you guys like to start? You had the really interesting article. What was your article, and what did you find interesting about it?
Our article was from the Times, the Richmond Times. It was from October 1901. The title is "Mr. Roosevelt's Picture Was Hissed." Evidently in this theater called, I guess it's the Bayou in Richmond, his picture, Teddy Roosevelt's picture, was hissed because of the fact that the Southerners were upset about him inviting Booker T to dinner at the White House. It's really very, it's kind of evil. It's a really evil article because the things that it says is pretty much, it's more like the public condemnation of Teddy Roosevelt in the fact that they're like, he's not wanted here because of his views to include, blacks within, his domain. So they're just really mean about it and saying, here's one quote that says, his question was from, what was the question?
What did they miss his picture for?
Just because he had invited Booker T to dinner at the White House. That he shouldn't have done that. His question
was, what did they hiss the picture for? And then the comment was, he ate with the nigger. And then it was repeated throughout the theater.
So this is obviously a very strong Southern commentary on the dinner. Do you have anything you'd like to volunteer from your articles? Any interesting things you found on your articles?
Well, ours was pro-meeting because they're saying he basically has the right to meet with any American citizen there. So and it's the American citizen, but y'all told us it was an African American newspaper, which we would have never figured out because it has oldest and best weekly paper devoted to the race in this section of the country. So I guess that had a hidden meaning. There's also an interesting quote here. Mrs. Roosevelt, as the first lady in the land, may not now need the Negro as servants. Wonder if President Roosevelt will need them in, and it looks like this is cut off. It just says 90. But if it was in 1904, that would infer maybe he's catering to the black vote.
For the Republican convention, because the black, even though people were being disenfranchised, blacks were being disenfranchised all over the place. The Southern convention goers were African American to the Republicans, and they could get him the next re-election. Yeah.
Do any of this side like to comment on what they found in their newspaper articles? Go ahead.
This is a black newspaper, The Colored American, and it has a very different take, and it just has a really profound one paragraph here that just really kind of, it's almost like it read that article and is responding. It said, Frederick Douglass and John Angston were guests at my house. I have survived the degradation, but the memory of the wonderful mental resources of the man lingers and is an inspiration. These wise Democrats of the South ignore the teachings of Jefferson and forget the golden principles of the matchless Declaration of Independence. And then he goes on to talk about the difference between professing these goals or these principles and living according to them.
Thank you very much. Any more for any more? Because I'm really worried about the time, but...
Well, we enjoyed reading this one. It's The Bee, and it's a black newspaper, although that was hard for us to identify. But kind of along the same lines as it's a Washington, D.C. paper. It's dated November 2nd, and it's clearly a rebuttal to the original article that came out about the dinner. And it's kind of along the same lines as y'all's paper. It's basically saying, hey, it's the president. He should be able to dine with whoever he wants, and you shouldn't question that. But they also bring up the Civil War and people like Jefferson Davis, and kind of take a shot at that, saying, talking directly to the Southern white man, hey, remember what happened in 1861 and 1865? Kind of like, you guys need to remember your place. When you
get way back.
Yeah, you better get way back. So, an interesting read.
Yeah, it was, and in the same article, when you mentioned those Southern leaders, there was a hint at, instead of, which I often think sometimes, General Lee was a great leader, but he probably under anywhere else, the loser would have brought up on charges, probably executed or something, you know. And this is hinted at, they couldn't say it there.
We got one from Cleveland that's called the Gazette. And it was interesting to us because we kept looking around for more, and it's just a little blurb, almost as if, why are we making such a big deal out of this? You know, it's like anyone should be able to invite someone of that stature to their home for dinner, and it's very supportive of that. And then it's in an article that goes on to talk about other things that's happening, not necessarily in an article to itself.
See, and that carries a lot of weight as well, because it's the idea of what's not said as well. So attitudes there when you think about the North and what made it a big deal type of thing. We are going to stop because we're going to run out of time. We have other ones in here, and we kind of threw them in the PowerPoint. Lots of different ones from Roanoke Times and places like that. That's in there. Here are the two. Here's his invite. And Aaron found this one, right? Here's his invite from Theodore Roosevelt to Booker T, saying, let's meet. Here is the response, saying, just ignore it, it's the elections, it's going to be a storm in a teacup type of thing. And that's a well-known picture that was used and things. And the thing is, though, just from a couple of, you can do different things with these. In the handout and also on your flash drives, you have some of the Word documents. So you can break them down, the newspapers, to make them shorter. Or it might be easy for them to read with children, to give them the Word documents to these as well. I just like the idea of holding ones. A lady at the back said, they're not always easy to read, and that's why we made started typing them out. We are going to be putting these on a website and sharing kind of more and more as we go. But we get to play. But if you think about it, it gives you insights into Booker T, Roosevelt, politics, the social issues at the time, and as Kathy often does, who's not said a word today because I've kept talking too much, as Kathy often does, so she'll kind of go to another side of the article and read about the lynchings, read about the riots, read about miscegenation in South Carolina. So it opens up, so newspapers can open up a real nice window. David?
Well, just very quickly, this is from the Boston Journal, and it basically has a whole sort of menu of different opinions from leaders in New England, and then it's all of whom are saying, well, we're for this, and then down at the very, 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 very bottom, in small print, it says some were reticent. And it basically says that a few African Americans who were sort of stopped on the street and asked for their opinion by reporters
didn't want to say.
No
kidding.
And that's in the North, and that's really important to say though, because this is not everybody loves black people in the North, you know. But it opens up. So social media, little insight. Thanks for playing.
Thank you.
See you later.